In the late summer of 1227, the sky above the western Xia kingdom hung low and gray. An empire's greatest warrior lay dying. Genghis Khan, the man who had risen from an outcast boy on the Mongolian steppe to become the ruler of the largest contiguous empire in human history, was on his final campaign. He was 65 years old. His body was broken. His campaigns had lasted over 40 years. Across deserts, mountains, rivers, and frozen plains he had ridden. He had bled. He had conquered. But even the greatest storms must one day run out of wind. The campaign against the Western Xia, a kingdom in what is now northwestern China, had been brutal. Genghis Khan had been determined to erase them from existence for their betrayal years earlier. City after city had fallen. The countryside was in ruin. And then, in August of 1227, the conqueror of worlds breathed his last. The exact cause of his death remains one of history's great mysteries. Some say he fell from his horse during a hunt. Others claim a fever took him. A few ancient accounts whisper of an infected battle wound. The Mongols themselves kept the truth a secret, so closely guarded that to this day his burial site has never been found. Legend says the soldiers who carried his body killed every person they encountered along the way. Horses were ridden over his grave to conceal any trace. The earth was smoothed flat, trees were planted, and then the mourners were reportedly killed by still more soldiers so that no living soul would ever know where Genghis Khan rested. He had asked for a simple burial. He got one worthy of a god. But the grief that followed was anything but simple. The Mongol Empire was built on the iron will of one man. Without him, everything trembled. His generals wept openly. His soldiers cut their hair and slashed their faces with knives, the Mongol custom of mourning. Across the steppes, from the Pacific to the Caspian, the news spread like winter. The Khan was dead. And with him died something else: certainty. Genghis Khan had named his third son, Ögedei, as his successor years before, but the Mongols did not inherit power like kings in the West. A new Khan had to be chosen by a Kurultai, a great council of the empire's nobles. But the Kurultai could not be called immediately. Messages had to ride across thousands of miles. Generals had to return from distant campaigns. And so, for 2 agonizing years, the empire was governed by his youngest son, Tolui, as regent. 2 years without a Khan. 2 years of tension, suspicion, and whispered rivalries. The princes gathered at last in 1229 on the sacred mountain of Burkhan Khaldun, the place where Genghis Khan had once hidden as a boy and sworn he would unite the Mongols. His sons stood before the council. Chagatai, the second son, proud and rigid, a strict enforcer of Mongol law. Tolui, the youngest, a brilliant military commander in his own right, loved by the army. And Ögedei, the chosen one, a man known more for his generosity and love of drink than for his father's iron discipline. Jochi, the eldest son, was already dead. He had died in mysterious circumstances 2 years before his father, and some historians believe the shadow of that death and the question of whether he was truly Genghis Khan's son still haunted the proceedings. When the nobles finally raised Ögedei to the throne, he reportedly wept, not from joy, from terror. He knew what his father had built. He knew he could never fill those boots. But he also knew that the Mongol Empire did not need another Genghis Khan. It needed something the great conqueror had never mastered: peace, administration, and the machinery of civilization. Ögedei accepted the crown. The empire exhaled, and the next chapter of the Mongol story began, a chapter that would see the conquest of Europe itself. The Mongol war machine did not rest. Under Ögedei's rule, the empire's borders pushed outward in every direction. In the east, armies campaigned against Korea and prepared for the conquest of Song China. In the south, Persian territories were brought to heel. And in the west, Ögedei gave the order that would terrify an entire continent. He sent two of his finest generals, Subutai and Batu, west. Subutai was already a legend. He had been Genghis Khan's most trusted commander for decades, a man who had never lost a battle. Now, in his 60s, his mind was sharper than ever. Batu, son of Jochi and grandson of Genghis Khan, brought the legitimacy of royal blood. Together, they commanded an army of perhaps 120,000 men, the largest Mongol force ever assembled for a single campaign. Their target, the kingdoms of Eastern Europe. Starting around 1236, the Mongol armies began their march across the western steppes. They swept through the Volga Bulgars, annihilating their resistance within months. Then they turned their attention to the Rus principalities, the patchwork of city-states that occupied what is now Russia and Ukraine. The Rus had heard stories of the Mongols. They did not believe them. In December 1237, the Mongols attacked Ryazan. The city fell in 6 days. Its population was slaughtered. Then Vladimir, then Suzdal, then Moscow, then barely a wooden outpost, was burned to the ground. The Rus princes had refused to unite against the threat. Each city fought alone. Each city fell alone. In 1240, the Mongols reached Kiev, the jewel of the Rus, the mother of all Russian cities. The cathedral bells rang in panic as the besiegers surrounded the ancient walls. The city's defenders fought fiercely, but they were hopelessly outnumbered and outmatched. Kiev burned. Its great churches, its libraries, its treasure, all reduced to ash and memory. The Mongol armies split into 2 columns and invaded Central Europe simultaneously. Subutai himself led the northern force. In April 1241, at the Battle of Legnica in modern-day Poland, a combined army of Polish knights, German crusaders, and Teutonic Order warriors rode out to face them. The Europeans believed their heavy cavalry and fortified positions would carry the day. They were wrong. The Mongols used a masterful feigned retreat, their signature tactic, drawing the European knights into a disorganized pursuit. When the knights tired and their formation broke, the Mongols turned, encircled them, and destroyed them utterly. The European dead were so numerous that it was said their banners, gathered together, could fill a church. Days later, the southern Mongol column met the Kingdom of Hungary at the Battle of Mohi. The Hungarian army, led by King Bela IV, was annihilated. The Mongols crossed the frozen Danube and chased the Hungarian king all the way to the Adriatic coast. Europe was in full panic. From Paris to Rome, from London to Constantinople, the rumors spread like wildfire. The Mongols were invincible. They were the armies of Gog and Magog, the apocalyptic hordes prophesied in the Bible. The end of Christendom was at hand. Pope Gregory IX called for a crusade, not against Muslims, but against the Mongols. Monasteries across Europe prayed without ceasing. Kings who had warred with each other for generations suddenly found common ground in their terror. And then, just as the Mongol armies were positioning for the invasion of Western Europe itself, a miracle arrived from the east. In December 1241, Ögedei Khan died. The word traveled fast across the steppes. Chagatai and Batu received the news and made a decision that would echo through the centuries. They withdrew. Every Mongol soldier, from the plains of Hungary to the forests of Poland, turned east. They had to return for the Kublai. They had to help choose the next Khan. Europe did not know why the Mongols had retreated. They only knew the nightmare was over. King Bela IV of Hungary, who had fled to a fortress on an Adriatic island, returned to find his kingdom in ruins. But he returned. History has often wondered, if Ögedei had lived just a few years longer, would all of Western Europe have fallen? Would Paris have burned? Would London have surrendered? Would the entire history of the Western world have been rewritten? The answer haunts every historian who studies the Mongol Empire. Europe was saved, not by its armies, not by its walls, not by its prayers, but by a single death on the distant Mongolian steppe. The Mongol Empire was now the largest land empire the world had ever seen. But something was rotting from within. After Ögedei's death in 1241, the succession crisis that followed was unlike anything the empire had faced before. Genghis Khan's will had been clear. Ögedei was to be Khan. But Genghis Khan was gone, and his sons and grandsons were not the men he had been. The Kublai of 1246 finally chose Guyuk, Ögedei's son, as the new great Khan. Guyuk was a proud, stubborn man, deeply suspicious of his cousins and convinced that many of them disrespected his authority. He was right to be suspicious. Batu Khan, the conqueror of Eastern Europe and the ruler of the vast western territories known as the Golden Horde, despised Guyuk. The two men had hated each other since before their father's generation. Batu refused to travel east to attend Guyuk's coronation in person, sending emissaries instead, a snub that Guyuk never forgave. Guyuk, once in power, began mobilizing an army to march west and confront Batu. He never got the chance. In 1248, after barely 2 years as Great Khan, Guyuk died, most likely of alcoholism, though poison has never been ruled out. He was on the road, leading his army toward the Golden Horde, when his body simply gave out. The empire now stood at the edge of civil war. For years, the throne sat empty. Guyuk's widow, Ögedei, served as regent, but she was neither respected nor feared. The various factions jostled for power. Batu, from his distant capital on the Volga, pulled strings and built alliances. It was Batu who eventually made the decisive move. He called a Kurultai on his own territory in 1251, a bold and controversial act since the ceremony was traditionally held in Mongolia itself. At that Kurultai, The Toluid faction, the descendants of Tolui, Genghis Khan's youngest son, seized power. Mongke, Tolui's eldest son, was proclaimed the new Great Khan. It was a revolution. The descendants of Ögedei were stripped of power. Guyuk's family was arrested. Those who resisted were executed. The Mongol Empire, which had been built on loyalty and the will of one extraordinary man, had now become a place where cousins killed cousins for the throne. Mongke Khan was a capable ruler. He was intelligent, organized, and determined to reassert central authority. He launched investigations into corruption within the empire, reformed the tax system, and commissioned the greatest census the world had ever seen, an accounting of every person and animal across the vast Mongol domains. But the damage was done. The empire was now ruled by the House of Tolui, not the House of Ögedei as Genghis Khan had intended. The other lineages, the descendants of Jochi, Chagatai, and Ögedei, simmered with resentment. Trust had broken down. The bonds of family, which Genghis Khan had always insisted were sacred, were now soaked in blood. And still, the Mongol armies marched. Mongke Khan dispatched his brothers to the corners of the world. Hulagu would go west, to Persia, to the Abbasid Caliphate, to the very heart of the Islamic world. Kublai would go east, toward the great prize of southern Song China. The empire was expanding even as it fractured. It was a contradiction that would define the rest of Mongol history. The greatest military machine on earth, tearing itself apart from the inside.
In 1253, Mongke Khan gave his brother Hulagu an order that would reshape the map of the Middle East forever. Hulagu was to march west with the largest Mongol army ever assembled. Estimates range from 100,000 to 300,000 soldiers, along with engineers, siege experts, and Chinese artillery specialists. His mission was simple: conquer everything in his path. Hulagu began by destroying the Nizari Ismaili state, the Order of the Assassins. For over a century, the Assassins had terrorized the Middle East from their mountain fortress at Alamut, high in the Alborz Mountains of northern Persia. Their agents had murdered 2 caliphs, multiple viziers, and even a crusader king. They were the boogeymen of the medieval Islamic world. Hulagu besieged Alamut in 1256. The fortress, which had never fallen to any army, surrendered in weeks. The Grand Master himself walked out and negotiated terms. Hulagu accepted the surrender and then destroyed the fortress anyway. The Assassin Order, which had endured for nearly 170 years, was erased in a single campaign. But that was merely the prelude. Hulagu turned his attention to the prize: Baghdad. Baghdad, in 1258, was the greatest city in the Islamic world. It had been the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate for over 500 years. At its peak, it was the center of the Islamic Golden Age, a city of scholars, poets, astronomers, physicians, and philosophers. Its libraries held manuscripts from every corner of the known world. Its streets were said to gleam with gold-leafed domes. Its population may have exceeded 1 million people. It was, by any measure, one of the great cities of human civilization. The Caliph, al-Mustasim, was a weak and indecisive man, more interested in his gardens and his poetry than in governance. When Hulagu's envoys arrived demanding surrender, the Caliph refused. He believed, against all evidence, that the walls of Baghdad would protect him. He believed that the Muslim world would rally to his defense. It did not. Hulagu's army arrived before the walls of Baghdad in January 1258. The siege engines were positioned. The bombardment began. The Caliph attempted to negotiate, but it was too late. Hulagu had lost patience. The walls were breached. The Mongols poured in. What followed was one of the most catastrophic events in human history. The Mongol soldiers systematically destroyed Baghdad over the course of 13 days. The city's grand mosques were burned, its libraries were sacked, its scholars were slaughtered. The population, men, women, and children, was massacred by the tens of thousands. Contemporary accounts describe the Tigris River running black with the ink of destroyed manuscripts. Others say it ran red with blood. Whether literal or poetic, the image captures a truth that cannot be exaggerated. An entire civilization's accumulated knowledge, art, and wisdom was consumed in a firestorm of violence. The death toll is disputed by historians. Some estimate as many as 800,000 people were killed. Even if the true number was far lower, the Sack of Baghdad represents one of the deadliest single events in recorded history. The Caliph himself was captured. According to Mongol tradition, royal blood was not to be spilled upon the earth. So Hulagu had al-Mustasim wrapped in a carpet and trampled to death by horses. It was a death without honor, the final humiliation of a dynasty that had once commanded the reverence of the entire Muslim world. The Abbasid Caliphate, which had endured for over 5 centuries, was extinguished. The Islamic Golden Age, that extraordinary period of scientific, philosophical, and cultural flourishing that had produced al-Khwarizmi, Ibn Sina, al-Biruni, and countless other luminaries, was effectively over. Some historians argue it had already been in decline for decades, but the Sack of Baghdad was the moment the world noticed. A door closed, a light went out. Hulagu established the Ilkhanate, a Mongol-ruled Persian empire that would endure for nearly a century, but it was built on ruins, on ash, on the grave of one of humanity's greatest cities.
While Hulagu's armies burned Baghdad, another of Mongke's brothers was fighting a very different kind of war in the east. Kublai Khan had been tasked with the conquest of southern Song China, the richest, most technologically advanced, and most heavily populated nation on earth. It would become the longest war in Mongol history. The Song dynasty controlled a vast, wealthy empire with over 100 million people. Its cities were walled fortresses. Its navy dominated the rivers and coastlines. Its soldiers were well-trained and well-equipped. The Song had gunpowder weapons, explosive bombs, and the world's most advanced naval technology. The Mongols, born on horseback, had to learn how to fight on water. It took them over 20 years. Kublai, a patient and methodical commander, gradually encircled the Song. He built fleets. He recruited Chinese engineers and generals. He adopted Song tactics and adapted them. City by city, province by province, he tightened the noose. The final siege of Xiangyang lasted from 1268 to 1273, 5 brutal years of grinding attrition before the city fell. It was the turning point. After Xiangyang, the Song collapsed rapidly. By 1276, the Song capital of Hangzhou had surrendered. In 1271, even before the conquest was complete, Kublai Khan had declared the establishment of a new dynasty, the Yuan. It was the first time a non-Chinese ruler had claimed the mandate of heaven, the divine right to rule all of China. Kublai Khan had become something no Mongol had ever been, Emperor of China. But Kublai's ambitions did not stop at China's borders. He turned his gaze eastward toward Japan. In 1274, Kublai launched the first Mongol invasion of Japan. A massive fleet of hundreds of ships and 25,000 soldiers crossed the Sea of Japan. The samurai warriors of Japan, fighting for the first time against a foreign army, were initially overwhelmed by the Mongol tactics and weaponry. And then the sky turned against the invaders. A massive typhoon struck the Mongol fleet, destroying ships and drowning thousands of soldiers. The survivors limped back to Korea. The Japanese called the storm the kamikaze, the divine wind. Kublai was furious. He tried again in 1281, this time with an even larger force, over 100,000 men, in what may have been the largest amphibious invasion in history prior to the 20th century. Once again, a typhoon struck. The fleet was shattered. The invasion failed. Japan would not be conquered. Back in China, Kublai Khan's Yuan dynasty oversaw a remarkable cultural exchange. The Silk Road flourished as never before. Marco Polo, the Venetian merchant, visited Kublai's court and spent 17 years in the empire. His accounts of the wealth, sophistication, and scale of China under Mongol rule astonished Europe and reshaped Western understanding of the East. But behind the splendor, the Mongol Empire was coming apart. It had split, not formally, not at a single moment, but gradually into 4 great khanates. The Golden Horde dominated Russia and Eastern Europe. The Ilkhanate ruled Persia and Mesopotamia. The Chagatai Khanate controlled Central Asia, and the Yuan dynasty governed China and Mongolia. These 4 khanates were, in theory, united under the authority of the Great Khan. In practice, they were rivals. They went to war with each other. They competed for trade routes. They stopped communicating. The empire that Genghis Khan had built through unity was dying through division. Each khanate eventually assimilated to the local culture. The Golden Horde adopted Islam. The Ilkhanate embraced Persian traditions. The Yuan became increasingly Chinese. The Mongol identity, that fierce, nomadic, horse-riding culture of the steppes, diluted with each passing generation. Kublai Khan died in 1294, an old and broken man, haunted by the failure of his Japanese invasions and the growing dysfunction of his family. The Yuan dynasty he founded would endure for less than a century before being overthrown by a Chinese rebellion in 1368. The Mongol Empire did not fall to a foreign invader. It did not collapse under the weight of a rival superpower. It dissolved because it succeeded too completely.
By conquering so much of the world, the Mongols created an empire too vast to govern from a single throne. By adopting the cultures of the peoples they conquered, they gradually ceased to be Mongol. By fighting each other for power, they destroyed the bonds of loyalty that had made them invincible. It is the final, bitter irony of the Mongol story. The greatest empire the world has ever known was not destroyed by its enemies. It was destroyed by itself. The grass still grows on the Mongolian steppe. The wind still carries the scent of wild thyme and horsehair. And sometimes, when the light is right and the land is still, you can almost hear the echo of hoofbeats, a ghost army riding across the plain, carrying the memory of the world they built and the world they lost.